We're smooth 98.1 FM. Good morning and welcome to Business Express. I've got my guest waiting and we're getting into the meat of the conversation straight away. And we also invite you to be a part of the conversation if you would send us a WhatsApp message on 20809-4440981 will be where we like to read your WhatsApp message, but you can also catch the live stream of this conversation on youtube.com/smooth 981 FM Lagos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also see previous edition of Business Express and other segments of shows on the station. So with that, I say good morning to Oluwaseun Arambada, economist, FBN Quest merchant, and I say welcome to you as you help Merchant Bank for your time this morning. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
All right, so just let's get 1 minute and we'll get back to you shortly. All right, we missed out on the good morning. Good morning to you once again. We'll go from the top once again. Oluwaseun Arambada, economist, FBN Quest Merchant Bank.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having me.
All right, let's get into this conversation as we look at what the IMF is saying, because they just completed its Article 4 mission to Nigeria and it published a report. And from that, we can see food, it says, is what the government should make a priority. But first off, back in 2023, that's in July, the federal government declared a state of emergency on food security. Year-on-year inflation, as we see now, is about 26.98%. As of January this year, the figure is now about 35.41%. What hasn't the state of emergency worked out? Why? What's really happening?
All right. Thank you once again. So, with regards to food security in Nigeria, I mean, this has been a problem coming, for a long time, right? I think it was a bold move, by the government to declare a state of emergency on food security. But if you look at that announcement, it came with about 12 action points, and one of which was, security for farmers and their farmlands, which has been a major issue that has kept farmers away from the farm. But as it stands, I don't think a lot of farmers have returned to the farm, right? And I think until we see that really happen, we might not see that kind of moderation in food inflation that we want to see. I think it's also important for me to let you know that generally prices are sticky downwards. And what I mean by that is when prices go up, they are not always, they are not always quick, to reverse to status quo. It takes a lot and it takes quite some time, for prices to revert to what they used to be. So I think that's pretty much what we're seeing and why food prices are still much at elevated levels.
I like to still explore that point where you say prices at the point, if they go up, they don't seem to come down that easily. Is this just a Nigerian phenomenon where it's about us? We like the profit or we like where it is now, so let's leave it there.
No. It's not it's not a Nigerian phenomenon. Economic agents are rational, right? And it's known that general price levels, tend to be sticky downwards. That is, when prices go up, it would take a lot more deliberate policy action and some time for prices, to revert to what it was prior to the increase. So it's not a Nigerian phenomenon. It's something that is global.
So even when those factors that have triggered it, seemingly when we see them, they've tapered down a bit, why wouldn't we begin to see it respond if that's what economic is rational?
Yes, the effect is not immediate. Ultimately, that is going to happen, but there's always a lag effect. It takes some time between when you begin to see results on the policy front, and then when you begin to see results on actual economic indicators.
So if this, from the report, the IMF is advising the government now to make food insecurity should be the government's number one priority. How can the government address this effectively? In July, they declared an emergency. What else after emergency declaration can we get to address the situation?
So, I mean, the top action points that the government showed us, I mean, if you look at that article or that policy announcement, you'll find that many of those action points, they're actually the way to go. Now, it all boils down to the political will to execute. I think that's what is going to make all the difference. You know, in previous administrations, we've seen concerted efforts at intervening in the agricultural sector. You know, the state of emergency says that is going to continue. You know, seed rollouts to farmers, fertilizers. I mean, that is the way to go, really. And it all boils down to the political will to execute. If these policies are being executed to the latter, I think we'll begin to see respite on that end.
Now, the fact that there's seeming what you call the food insecurity has been expressed even by the report from the IMF and even the government itself acknowledging that and by the declaration of that emergency. Well, something happened recently now that is making it look like to receive goodwill, it seemed like it's a bad thing to do. But let's get this, because through the United Nations, Nigeria received about 25,000 tons of wheat from Ukraine. And there's been the backlash of, shouldn't we be ashamed that a war, a country in the midst of war is seeing us as a priority to reach out to at this time?
Okay, so I understand the point of view of the critics of this development, but at the same time, we should know that this is international relations, and Ukraine is one of the top exporters of grains in the world, right? I think they're ranked about fifth, in the world. So they are actually a very, when it comes to they are rich in, wheat exports and grains generally. And when you look at the markets they export to, I mean, Nigeria comes only second to I think Egypt, and then there's Turkey, and then there's China, then Nigeria. So I mean, Ukraine has a lot of grains to supply. So I personally think there's really nothing to be ashamed of, right? And moreover, I understand that for a country that has been so hit hard in terms of productivity doesn't mean they are now even more productive during war periods than in Nigeria. No, that's not necessarily the case. I know that Russia and Ukraine brokered a deal that allows for trade for their grains. So I don't think the war has really inhibited their grain exports. So I really don't think there's anything to be ashamed of. Really.
So in essence, it looks more like even though Ukraine is at war, it's still doing business and still carrying out diplomacy.
Of course, business has to go on.
Okay, let's move away. The IMF also said in its report that direct transfers to the most vulnerable, that's being the issue in terms of needs, to be implemented immediately. That's what it's saying, considering the corruption scandal and the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry. Is there a way to complete this transfer effectively? Or how can do we outsource it to aliens or angels to come solve it for us for once?
Right. So I think this is where the effectiveness of institutions, comes to play. You cannot isolate the economic growth of any country from the quality of its institutions. The policies that are going to be rolled out by the governments, institutions will be the ones to carry them out. And I think one of the problems that we've had in Nigeria over time is the effectiveness of institutions. The institutions need to be further strengthened, to be able to carry out their actions effectively and, reduce some of these bureaucracies to a very large extent. We've seen how some bureaucracies and ineffectiveness of institutions have stifled some policies that were meant for good. I think this is something we have to face decisively, for the payments to reach, those that it's intended for and not just to be carted away.
All right, this takes us to what the IMF also raised again as a concern. About 3% of our gross domestic product, GDP, might be going into electricity subsidy, and this is not something they're smiling about, so they're warning now. But on the other side of the coin, there's some saying that the removal of this electricity subsidy might create more hardship, knowing that if you factor in the removal of petrol subsidy or the announcement sometime last year, what it has triggered, then you add electricity removal of subsidy in that sector to it. can we contain the tsunami of the reaction? But how do we find a balance in all of this to remove or not to remove?
Okay, I think the word really is balance, like you said, because there is the pressing need for, as we would say in finance, to free up cash flows for the government and for all of those monies to be directed to more productive, sectors of the economy. But as it is, as governments, they are not really just focusing on the numbers. They are also looking at outcomes from a welfare perspective, right? I think the subsidies, and it's widely agreed that they have to go, right? It's something that has lingered for quite some time, so they just have to go. But in terms of hardship, yes, the average Nigerian would be bothered about how, say probably the increase in tariffs, would affect their wallets and all of that. But I think the main focus is how much value are they getting for their money? Really, I think that's what the average Nigerian is concerned about. And in as much as they are able to get, value for what they put in, I think the average Nigerian will be fine. So, like I said, the word really is balance.
It is still Business Express on Smooth 98.1 FM. We're looking forward to getting your messages begin to drop in now as we getting ready to sum up the conversation this morning. So let's get to read your messages on 0809 reacting to what the IMF says Nigeria should make food priority number one for them. So see the messages piling. Gilbert will be up to you shortly. But let's sum up as we've got two more items on your tray this morning. Oluwaseun. The IMF has welcomed the monetary policy tightening measure by the CBN as a result of the Monetary Policy Committee meeting and the hiking of the rates at the meeting to about 22.7% and the cash reserve ratio to about 45%. What would your own opinion be about this?
Okay, right. So tightening monetary policy tightening interest rates by 400 basis points really was a surprise. I mean, I expected a tightening this year anyway, but to be honest, 400 basis points was a surprise. But then on the second thought, the question would be, what do you expect from a central bank that's supposed to be independent and has at its disposal the instrument of short-term interest rates? What do you expect them to do when inflation is at 30%? It's highest in many years. Really, there's there's really little, other than tightening. In terms of the extent of tightening, I think we're going to see some results, right? Because I think that's going to mop up liquidity from the system a little bit and then control the demand side of inflation. But in terms of the broader economics, I think that in the short term, that increase in interest rates would attract some, portfolio investment. But we know that what we really need as a country is the more stable and long-term foreign direct investment. Will this do the magic? I do not think so. The more structural factors needs to be addressed for us to see that. So the implications for that for the banking system is that would most likely see lending rates go up across banks. Banks also would be very cautious in terms of expansion, loan creation, and all of that. So really, I think we'll see some liquidity mop up and address the little bit of inflation.
In order of this seemingly sober and gleam outlook from the IMF report, we can let you go without giving us your own outlook of Nigeria's economy for this year. If you can do that in about 30 seconds.
Okay, right. So I think for us, we have a conservative approach to growth as well. I think we are looking at a growth of about 3.1% in 2024. I think that the tightening is going to us growth. I mean, something must give, but I think on the fiscal side, if they're able to concert effort, I think they can prop up growth, from that end. So yes, the tightening is going to us growth, but inflation also on consumer wallets is the real thing which is also.
Honestly, listening to the words now, at 400 basis points, you said, man, it comes as a very tight measure. So it looks like the waist would grow lean if this measure is not yielding as soon as possible. I've got a message waiting on the fringes already for you, and it's from Gilbert Musa from Festac, and he says, we commend the action plan by the government to address food insecurity challenge in Nigeria, but it is key that we are proactive than reacting to events in Nigeria. The continuous farmers-herder clash is just one out of the numerous food security challenge. The Agatu village attack in 2016 was enough for a master plan to be created to unravel food insecurity in our country. That's also what it is, just looking at insecurity as a major factor that is a
Exactly.
trigger for this.
Yeah.
So, well, for a Wednesday, we can keep you further than this, knowing that it's going to be a very busy and rewarding Wednesday for you. I want to say thank you to Oluwaseun Arambada, economist, FBN Quest Merchant Bank, for your time. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.